Okay, folks, good morning, and thanks for joining us for The Wisdom of the Soul. This is our third in an ongoing Zoom class, absolutely free. A non-religious, I guess non-organized religion. Some people use religion in a really general way, but this is not about any particular religion. It's comparative in a sense, but it goes way beyond religion to philosophy and psychology, to physics, metaphysics, and quantum physics. And that's part of what's so fun for me about doing a class like this, is that it can be so all-encompassing. So, as you might expect here at the top, we're sort of laying the foundation for everything that will follow. And I'll summarize briefly, and then we'll do an opening meditation, and then we'll get into today's lesson. About an hour from now, we'll go to Q&A and spend about 30 minutes doing Q&A. So we expect around a total of about 90 minutes. And again, my deep appreciation for you being here. These programs are going to be posted on my YouTube channel. Just search for Ageless Wisdom Mystery School on YouTube, and you'll find these videos alongside my radio program, which I also post there. And yet, if and when you're able to make it live, we really appreciate it. I mean, I could do this alone, I suppose, and just post it on YouTube. So what's the point? Well, hell, it's a whole lot more fun to have a group of living, breathing, smiling people here. And when it comes to the group meditation, it makes a difference too, as I think you'll see. We'll talk more in the future about meditating in groups and invoking groups whenever you meditate. Even if you're alone, you can invoke the group of everyone in the world who's meditating at that same time. Not something most people think of, but we'll talk about why that matters at some point, I'm sure. So in terms of summary, in the beginning, there is a prime mover. There's a new term for a lot of us, prime mover, sometimes called first cause. We know what a sorcerer is. That comes from the word source, obviously. What is the source of things? What is the beginning? It's often said we live in a universe of cause and effect. Well, if you daisy chain your way back, like what caused this? Oh, well, that was an effect of some other cause. What caused that? And that must be an effect of some cause, so what caused that? And as they say, if you daisy chain your way back, what's the first cause? This is called the prime mover. I must say, many of us who consider ourselves spiritual but have not ever been able to comfortably align ourselves with a particular organized religion sometimes have a problem using the word God, because it brings up images of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, the painting of this white fella looking very much like Santa Claus on a cloud reaching out from someplace else. And this is the basic monotheism of the three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. One God, but separated from its creation, living outside its creation. So if you are uncomfortable using that term, you can use source, you can use creator, you can use first cause, capitalized, prime mover, both words capitalized. And another term I want to introduce to you that is often used in philosophy is capital A, absolute, the absolute. And this this idea for the source or the prime mover is that we can avoid personifying whatever is the source of things. What is all of this and where does it come from? And in our first class a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the word one and the difference between the separate one, this one versus that one, and the idea of one as a unified whole. And indeed, the word universe has one in it. Una, of course, is a prefix for one. Universe means one thing spinning around. And so all of these are alternatives, ways of sidestepping the word God if you're uncomfortable with it. I use it, but only because here I am creating this context. I like absolute. I like prime mover. I like first cause. I like just saying the universe or nature, some people will say, or the cosmos. There's another great word, cosmos. And then last week we went on in our second class to talk about the extension of that energy, of that spirit into form, into matter, into solid stuff. You know, stars and asteroids and meteors and rocks and dust. And I'm tempted to say soil, but of course soil, dirt, is the result of organic life finding a way to exist on a rock. And every bit of soil on the planet, of course, was at one time a plant. Excuse me, or a critter of some sort. But when we talk about, in a sense of monism, the alternative to monotheism, a unified one, we have to consider that that goes beyond so-called organic life, and that the one thing, or the one life, that was a term the ancient Egyptians used, Hermetic philosophy, the one thing, would include the rocks and the soil and the rivers and the sky. And the idea that these two, this so-called inorganic life, is imbued with consciousness or awareness on some level. Obviously, animals are not as conscious as humans. There's only 8 animals besides humans that can recognize their reflection in a mirror. That's a pretty high level of self-awareness. It's a standard that's often used in science. So most animals are less aware than humans. Some may be more aware, like dolphins and whales and such. Plants are less aware than animals, but clearly they grow, they propagate, and maybe most importantly, they react and respond to their environment. So plant life is life. And it's debatable, depending on your philosophy, whether that would include the rocks and the minerals, the periodic table and such. So that's all a manifestation or an emanation, an extension. That's another word that's used. And so just as Einstein explained how energy extends itself or manifests as matter, and all that is material and solid is actually energy, you put the equal sign between them times the speed of light squared, right? Massive amounts of energy in tiny little particles. E equals mc squared. Well, that's the same thing as spirit extending itself into matter. And this is the duality, the polarities that we talked about last week. So this week we're going to go to number 3 and answer that riddle. What comes third stands as number 2 and makes the 3 a 1. Okay. This is where the magic is, gang. This is the center of this trinity, this trimurti, the threeness of things. And though I promised last week and failed to get to it, I have a document that we'll go over, and hopefully you're able to download that from the email that I sent on Friday night. And, excuse me, and have had a chance to look it over. Excuse me a sec here. Something I can't do on radio. Pause for a cup of coffee, a little sip. 1, 2, 3, that's our first three classes. In the beginning, there was the one. It created the three. You know, spirit manifests as matter. We often have gender laid over this. Father manifests mother. You know, born of Adam's rib and all of that. And out of that union comes the third element, which stands as number 2, the offspring of spirit and matter, which is consciousness. This is awareness. This is love. This is the meaning between cause and effect. And so that's our topic for the day today. By this time, I think probably everyone has arrived who's going to arrive. So let's do our opening meditation. Just a few minutes here to clear away the cobwebs. If you get nice and comfortable in your chair, put your feet flat on the floor. Do not cross your ankles or your legs. Unless for some reason you may be in a yoga position, that's fine. Otherwise, most of us Westerners, we meditate in chairs. So put your feet flat on the floor. Open up your rib cage. Put your shoulders back. Close your eyes. And feel the chair supporting you. Begin to let go and settle in. And a wonderful way to do that, of course, is 3 or 4 nice, slow, deep breaths. Inhaling through your nose. Hold for just a beat as you peak, and then through the nose or the mouth, exhale slowly and evenly all the way out. And do this a couple of more times. There are practices where the exhalation is 2 or 3 times slower than the inhalation. But I'd suggest here you think of it being fairly even. Pulling in strength and power as you inhale, and as you exhale, feel the letting go from head to toe. Allow your breathing to return to autopilot. Let your body breathe itself. Gently sweep the length of your body from head to toe and back, releasing the last of any residual tension, pressure, nervousness, or stress. And create and sense that letting go feeling as you allow your awareness to come to rest on a point at the bottom of your nose, where we just spend a moment watching the body breathe itself all by itself. As if nothing else for the next 2 or 3 minutes is really all that important. And in fact, you're curious about your awareness that your body is breathing itself without awareness all the time. Even when you're asleep or otherwise unconscious. And so you identify as the watcher rather than the breather. You're simply witnessing this body breathing itself. To create and sustain a sense of non-attachment, of letting go. To be detached would be oblivious. But non-attachment allows us to watch passively, without being engaged in the process. And you may wish to silently and internally whisper to yourself, I am the watcher. Without any judgment, there are no bad breathing, no good breathing, nothing good or bad, nothing right or wrong about this moment. You realize the past is simply images in your mind. The future too, mere phantasms, pictures in your head of what may be. And you let it go, realizing the truth of the eternal moment unfolding all by itself with an in-breath and an out-breath. And when you practice this at home each day, begin by simply identifying this is an in-breath, this is an out-breath. And then from that fixed point on the bottom of your nose, watch the full length of the in-breath, the pause, and the full length of the out-breath, and the pause. Again, without participating or engaging in it in any way. And don't judge it. Let go of those too. And already you can feel your racing mind slowing down. Rapidly, the distractions become fewer and fewer. Higher brain functions come online. Your awareness expands. Insight becomes more available. Lines and borders and that which separates dissolves and begins to replace or. And you must admit everything right now is okay, just fine. And again, without any effort at all, let's finish this exercise by imagining this peace, this inner tranquility to radiate out from you and envelop this troubled world. Imagine everywhere your family members, friends, co-workers, especially those who disturb you or upset you or trouble you in any way. Like the gentle warmth of the sun on a beautiful day, just imagine that peace moving on cat's feet to embrace those people. And indeed, the warring nations, and anyone who is frightened, confused, grieving, or overwhelmed in any way, may they know this peace. Say to yourself, silently, and so it is. And prepare to return to the waking state. Simply become aware once again, bring to mind the feeling of the chair supporting you. Feel the floor beneath your feet. Remember the room in which you sit, where you are, how you're oriented, and that in a moment when you open your eyes, you'll be wide awake and alert. And take a nice big breath, big giant inhalation. Hold as you peak and as you exhale. Open your eyes, wide awake, alert, rested, refreshed. Back in the room, feeling better and better and better. Yahoo! Again, I'm going to put in a plug for 5-minute meditations, 10-minute meditations, 2-minute meditations. You got to call your bluff when the ego, which is terrified of allowing you to discover who and what the ego or the persona really is, tries to distract you and tell you that you don't have time. You're very, very busy. You're a very important person. You can't do this anyway. It doesn't even matter. And it wants to spin you off into monkey mind. It's all a big distraction. It's like, you ever wonder why the magician on stage has the beautiful, scantily dressed assistant? You know, it's a distraction. And that's what the ego does. That's what all this frenzy and this monkey mind and this feeling that you never get caught up. There's always another problem, something else popping into your head. It's exhausting. It's too much. And you don't have to play the game. Somebody starts tugging your rope, you don't have to pull back. You can let go of the rope and just, for 5 minutes once a day, let go of the rope, give up the struggle, refuse to do it. Watch your breath instead. Identify as the watcher, not the breather. This is important as we expand this technique to thoughts and feelings and awareness of the world around us, to be the witness rather than the participant. 15, 20-minute meditations are ideal once a day. But you've always got, if that voice says we don't have time, we're way too busy. You don't even have to close your eyes. You can meditate at a traffic light for 30 seconds. Just fix your gaze. That's the important thing. If you want to do an eyes open meditation, like you're in public, sitting on a park bench and you want to meditate, but you're you're concerned if you close your eyes, someone will think you're dead, steal your purse or your wallet or something, or the pigeons will land on your shoulders. Fix your gaze gently. That reduces, what you're doing is reducing brain stimulus. So it's very much like closing your eyes. All right, my meditation pitch, that's the practice. And then we open our eyes and welcome in the frenzy and welcome in the ego. And the point is you like an automobile, well, the old cars that had gear shifts and clutches, you take off in first gear, clutch, shift into second gear. You can go through the gears. There's times when you want to be excited and frenetic and keep all the plates spinning and the balls in the air and multitasking and handling the emergencies. And then other times that we conk out and go to sleep and maybe don't even remember our dreams. But the middle is huge. All this alpha and theta brainwave places in the middle between wide awake and deeply asleep that we can explore, levels where our focus is fixed. And what's the point? The awareness is expanded. Greater understanding, more profound insight. Okay, so let's talk about the threeness of things today. Again, we did 1 and 2. I think the basic is physics, energy, manifests as material form. Actually, this week I saw a video on YouTube. You could search it out if you want. It's film of Einstein explaining that all material form, all solid matter, the physically dense universe, is simply energy. So these two primary forms are really substantially just one thing, energy. What is energy? It's the prime mover. It's the ultimate. Everything is energy. And it manifests as solid form. Well, that's the same as the creation myth of spirit or God creating matter. In the beginning, there was the Word, and there's all these wonderful creation myths from various cultures around the world. But that's what that's an allegory for. God created heaven and earth. It means energy manifested as physical form. There's no disagreement here between so-called religion and science. Often the father aspect and mother aspect, gender, is laid over this. Because as I mentioned last week, the source could not be a single gender, could not be less than all that is. So why do we think of the absolute, the prime mover, as masculine? God as a man, the father aspect. Well, because spirit is causative to matter. When you think of matter, it comes from the word mater, for female, madre. Matter, the material world, is feminine, Mother Nature, Gaia. Because physical dense is receptive to that spirit. It's just an allegory. It's just a teaching aid. Of course, in the physical world, it's the feminine that gives life. And this was very disturbing, of course, always has been, to patriarchal religions and churches. And there have been mythologies in the West, the Greco and Roman pantheon of gods. We see images of children being born out of the male body, out of a man's thigh. I think one of the Greek gods was born out of Zeus's thigh, and one out of Apollo's forehead. That's because they couldn't handle the idea that they're portraying the creator as male, when in fact it's women who give birth and nurture. And so, most important to understand that in the Christian trinity, all 45,000 denominations of Christianity, I'll say it again, all 45,000 denominations of Christianity use Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or Holy Ghost when it's Father, Son, Mother, just to keep women out of it. Even Mary Magdalene at various times in the last 2,000 years has been conflated with a prostitute, or well, I'll leave it at that. And the demeaning of women, the misogyny of the church, is not something I need to dwell upon. But that's where Holy Spirit comes from. So I want to bring up this form with any luck, and be patient with me because Zoom is new for me. I've participated enough, but this screen sharing stuff is a little new. So let's see if I can bring up this form and expand it. So do you guys see that on your screen? Hannah, can you tell me?
Yep, it's great.
Okay. And again, if you didn't notice, you can download this from the newsletter I sent out to you on Friday night, Saturday morning, you may have got it. So we're talking about the Godhead, or the absolute source, again, in a non-religious way, as emanating, you see the word, the arrows, for the purposes of this graph or this chart, I have to lay it out horizontally so that I can move down the page. So, cause, meaning, effect, the creator, love, the creation, the one, the group, the many. We can think of this, and usually do, in a vertical sense. Heaven is up there, and hell is down there. So we have our vertical orientation. I've just laid it out horizontally so that I can list them on the page. So if we look at cause, meaning, and effect, again, we live in a cause and effect universe. And you might have never considered that there is a middle element between cause and effect. Again, what unifies opposites into one whole thing? So often, opposites are two forms of the same thing, and not as far apart as you might imagine. You think of the end zones of a football field, or a soccer field, or hockey, whatever, as being at opposite ends, opposing teams, very far apart. But sometimes pairs of opposites are two sides of the same coin. This is a distinction that we need to learn to allow to confound us a little bit, to wrestle with, or to, like cold clay, you sort of got to knead it and work some warmth into it so you can work with this idea. I often think, and it's because I'm old enough to remember, many of you may not be old enough to remember Spy versus Spy in Mad Magazine, but it was these two odd little characters that were simply profiles. And one was in silhouette, like this all black, two-dimensional guy with a funny hat. And then his opposite was the same thing, only he was completely white, outlined with a thin black line. And they were opposites. They represented, the white guy represented the American spy or Western NATO spy. And the guy that was all black, you always know the bad guys because they wear the black hats. The allegory of light and dark and how that corresponds to good and bad is clear enough. The all-black guy, he was the Russian spy or the Soviet spy back in those days. And they kept trying to blow each other up. They had these bombs. And each month in Mad Magazine, there'd be a different episode of these guys opposing each other and yet acting exactly alike, doing exactly the same thing. And usually whatever they tried to do to the other would bounce back and happen to them. And it was such a wonderful mental exercise to think of opposites in this new way. So far opposite, so different that they become the same again. You see the paradox? And paradox is something we also need to get familiar with. The great Chinese philosopher Confucius is said to have written that all truth is found in paradox. If you don't see the puzzle or the exception or the contradiction, you're not seeing the whole truth. So to look at truth as something that settles the matter, like it's all this way and no variation, is a mistake. And as you leave school and move out into life, you learn pretty quickly just how complex life can be and how paradoxical and how much of what feels like it ought to be clear is really wrapped in enigma. One way to think of the middle between cause and effect, the second ray, so to speak, and again, I just don't have room for all of these on a single page, is to call cause stimulus and effect response. And between stimulus and response is not only meaning, but consciousness, our perspective, our point of view. Again, remember, I keep saying the mystery is in the middle, the secret is in the center. This is where the magic happens. The element that comes third stands as number two, the son of Father Spirit and Mother Matter, or the daughter, the offspring, is consciousness, this middle aspect. So a parallel for the meaning between cause and effect is our perspective or our point of view between stimulus and response. Now, quite often, because of our stress levels, we react reflexively to a stimulus. Somebody catches you off guard, surprises you, and you jump unconsciously, reflexively, before you even realize what's happened. Or the classic example of reflex is when you get a physical and the doctor will ask you to cross your legs, and he or she will hit just below your kneecap with a little hammer and your leg swings out. That signal goes to the spine and then back to the muscle in the leg while it proceeds to the brain. So we've developed through natural selection, evolution, survival, all of that, this reflexive ability to respond before the signal even reaches the brain, before we even become conscious of it. And That's great for surviving danger, but it's not a great way to communicate with people who are leading into you, so to speak, disagreeing with you and giving you a tough time. And you act reflexively, you speak reflexively without thinking. This is sometimes called emotionally polarized, where instead of thinking and then feeling and then acting, we act out of the emotion and think about it later. The thought comes last. You say to people, hey, that was pretty stupid, why'd you, or maybe to yourself, that was pretty stupid, why'd you do that? And the answer that comes up is usually, because I felt like it. You're very defensive, want to make something out of it. Yeah, but did you ever think that? No, actually I didn't think until now. And that type of thinking is usually rationalization. Now, out of our defensiveness, we rationalize the reflexive behavior that we did because we felt like it. This is the way animals behave. You're not using your higher brain functions. But if we can open up, if we're willing to pause and expand that middle between stimulus and response, between cause and effect, we may not be able to control what happens to us, the cause or the stimulus, but we can choose how we look at it and how we respond. Both of those things. Lots of times people will say, well, I can't control what's done to me, but I can choose my response. You can also choose your perspective as well as your attitude, how you frame it, how you look at it. Right? Something negative happens. You want to beat yourself up? Yeah, okay. We've all done that enough times. Self-criticism we're all real good at. How about just chalking it up to a lesson learned and then dwelling on it? What can I learn from this? And there's a lot of permutations and variations. And so we have two choices before we respond. Our perspective and the response that we choose to initiate. Instead of reacting, some people spend their whole lives reacting, and never initiating. And if we do initiate a behavior, we very quickly fall into reacting to the results of that behavior. And we slip right back into this reflexive, reactive mode. People who do this are often called reactionaries, right? And they tend to live in an absolute world of all or nothing, either or. Very reflexive, holding on for dear life. There's a lot of fear involved in that. So it's love and understanding and insight that opens up the space, the point of view, the perspective between stimulus and response, the meaning between cause and effect. Creator love and creation. And let me see, I've got this bar, and how do I move this bar without shutting this down? Give me a second here. I can see what I'm doing. Love always is going to be in the middle, right? We think of love as corresponding to the heart, which is in the center of your body. Love is the center. God is love. We've heard that. People will often say, especially really fundamental religious people, God loves you. Jesus loves you. Be sure you love God, like it's an exchange, like it's a romance, right? That's very different, I would have you consider, from God is love. The creative force is love, not an emotional love. Hey, baby, give me a hug. Love has consciousness, as awareness. is the ability to witness, to be conscious. To be aware of being aware is to notice what you notice, and I'm sure we've all noticed there are many times where we're not noticing what we notice. That's this middle aspect again. Ancient mystics refer to the one, the group, and the many. I think that sort of speaks for itself, other than to say that unity and diversity, the one, unity, the many, diversity, more than diversity actually, uniqueness. In the middle we have the group. This is the idea that the soul lives in ashrams. Remember that Led Zeppelin album, Houses of the Holy? Not to mention Stairway to Heaven. That's what that's about, the idea that souls live in groups or families, hippie communes, if you will. And so the Godhead is total unity, and obviously we're out here in separated bodies, or what appear to be separated bodies in a world of separated form, but in the middle, the soul, between spirit and matter, the consciousness, the love, works in groups or ashrams. More on that later. And of course, in monotheism, this is God, soul, and human. I put a little hyphen in human to remind me to mention that hue is a word for God. I'm trying to think of the derivation of that. It escapes me. I think it may be Middle Eastern, like Sufi, or maybe it goes back to ancient Egypt. I'm not sure. You could Google that if you want. But human is God in man. That's where the word human comes from. Humanity. That's pretty basic. God, soul, man. What is soul? What's the difference between soul and spirit? Well, if we could go down a couple of more, we see energy, force, and form. We see spirit, consciousness, and matter. So spirit is a reference to the unity, the oneness. Soul is the middle aspect, or the group, the consciousness. Father, Son, Mother, we've talked about. Father, Son, Holy Ghost. This really proceeds, if you look back in history, Christians don't teach this or talk about it, but and Hermetic philosophy is essentially dead. Nobody really, other than those who are curious about alchemy. But the original Trinity, long before Christianity was ever founded, and even before Moses, the Trinity comes out of ancient Hermetic philosophy of king, prince, and queen. And this is Osiris, Horus, and Isis. Some of you may be familiar with Blavatsky's work, Madame Blavatsky, Isis Unveiled. That's again the same Trinity, king, prince, queen, Father, Son, Mother, Holy Spirit. Now, Theosophy has a curious way, and I think really an important... Yeah.
Gentle little reminder, it's 11:55.
Okay, thank you. I do want to open it up for Q&A. Thank you, Hannah. This next one, Theosophy, will, love, and physical activity is real important because, again, we've already said that the Bible makes numerous references to God is love, but there's also mentions of the will of God. So which is it? Well, it's both. It's the will of God that emanates the love. Love truth is often hyphenated in Theosophy. At some point we'll talk about what Theosophy is and where it comes from. It's really over 1,000 years old, this concept of Theosophy, so-called philosophy and theology combined. But it's the will of the Absolute that manifests the truth of love, the magnetic nature that allows the one to manifest as the many without being diminished. And in Sufism, we have the beloved as a reference for the divine, love, the middle element, and the lover. You could say the same thing about light. We could put in here sun, S-U-N, as the source, the light, which is invisible and unseen, in the middle, and the third aspect would be light reflected, which is what allows us to see things. It's reflected light. If you look into the source of light, you burn your eyeballs. Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, you see it reflected here: virtue, wisdom, intelligence, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Buddha is as close as Buddhism gets to talking about the source or divinity. There are millions and millions of Buddhas, not simply the one, Prince Siddhartha. Dharma is the teachings, Sangha is the community. Sat, Chit, and Ananda in Vedic philosophy, Brahmanism, Hinduism. The definitions are here: reality, consciousness, and bliss. The best known trinity in Hinduism, 1,001 different religions, is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. You've all heard that. This creator, preserver, and destroyer, or dissolver, I think may be a better word. Sort of like spring, summer, and fall. Shiva has to tear it all down for it to blossom again in the spring. And then there are others. I like alchemy too. Ever heard of the salt of the earth? These are the three magical elements in ancient Hermetic alchemy: sulfur, the prime element; mercury, the ever-changing, the mercurius, the mercurial; and salt of the earth. That, of course, would be the mother aspect, the third aspect. And astrology to round it out. Obviously, the sun is the source. The earth is the physical, represents the physical universe, the body of divinity. And the moon represents the love aspect. Perhaps why it's so romantic, full moon. So you have that handout, or if you go back, you can pull it out of your the email that I sent to you. I hope that makes sense to you. What I want you to do now that I've presented these, and we'll move on next week and talk about the lower correspondence to all of this, which is the mental, emotional, and physical aspects of human beings. We're going to move from the spiritual to the personal development. Okay, many of you are going, this is what I came for. How does this relate to the way I think, the way I feel, and the silly things I sometimes do? And that's the lower correspondence of this trinity. And that'll be our topic next week. But I'd like you to play around with this handout by reading the vertical columns in what I've just gone through. We went through it horizontally, line by line, but take some time to compare the different ways. The first column, the source, the absolute, the Godhead is represented. And then the middle column, the love, the consciousness, the soul, how those connect. And then the third column, the physical universe, the earth, the activity, the manifested intelligence. And you'll start to get a grip on this whole thing. And not just the beauty and the elegance of the Trinity, but how imperative it is to understanding the world, the universe, how things work. Not only philosophy, again, but and psychology, but basic physics. Metaphysics is beyond physical physics. That's what meta means, behind or beyond. So physics, metaphysics, and we'll touch a little on quantum physics too. So there you go. So now you have the 1, the 2, the 3, and you know what comes third. Consciousness stands as number 2 and makes the 3 into a 1. The consciousness is the magnetic field that unifies the polarities of the bar magnet. You can think of the bar magnet, North Pole, South Pole, as being opposites. But again, they're two sides of the same coin. There are no opposites. And the middle, the heart and soul of the bar magnet, the consciousness, so to speak, is the magnetic field, such that there is no place on the bar magnet or near in the field around the bar magnet that is not both. And that's the ultimate lesson of the middle. Christ is referred to countless times in the New Testament as the Son of Man and the Son of God. It's both. Consciousness is spirit and matter. It's the interface. And when we talk next week about the lower correspondence, you'll see this is true about emotions, which are part mental, part physical. They have a very direct relationship to the way you think, but they're felt in the body. You feel your emotions in your body. If you think you feel your emotions in your head, we're going to introduce you to a whole new universe of actually moving into your body to experience your emotional nature. And that's where emotional management comes from. So what's the point of all of this? We're going to bring it home to this lower correspondence. And if you think of the graph I gave you in the vertical sense, God, soul, man, spirit, consciousness, matter, in the vertical sense, think of the lower correspondence in the horizontal sense. And then you have the cross, and the emotional nature and the love consciousness nature intersect. More on that next week. So, questions and comments. I'd love to hear comments. I'd love to answer your questions. And if you want to, I have no idea how many people we have. So should we use hands, Hannah, or should we just ask people to speak up?
There's 23 of us, 22 of us right now, including me and you. People can raise their hands if they'd like, or go ahead and pipe up.
There's a button in the bottom that says reactions. And if you open reactions, the bottom bar in there says raise hand, so that we don't have people talking over each other, but it may not be a problem with 20 people. So let's hear from you. And please don't be intimidated. There's no bad questions. All right? Curiosity is a wonderful thing. What's it all about? The best part of doing this live is that we have this opportunity for questions. Anybody?
David looks like he's about to unmute himself.
Yeah.
Oh, Robert has a hand up.
Good. What say you, Robert?
Well, hey, Michael. See, I'm. It's more not so much a question, but pondering what you've been discussing, and from my understanding, the need for opposites is more to bring about balance, of being able to seek the middle, and that's why we need what we perceive as opposites. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, I think that's spot on. And thank you for bringing that up. I'm almost embarrassed that I didn't mention it, but there's just so much here. What you're reminding me of when you talk about balance and centering is the symbol of Taoism, which is this beautiful, you all know it, it's the circle with the sort of teardrop shape on each side, one black, one white, but there's a dot of the opposite in each, such that there is no point where the pendulum swings so far one way that it's no longer influenced by the other pole. And then, of course, you have a sine wave, not a flat line, but a sine wave going through the center of that polarity, and then a circle that prescribes it so that it's one whole thing. And all of those things are true. There is a struggle, of course, in philosophy and religion about the nature of evil as it regards, as we think of it as the opposite of good. I'll say it that way. Good and evil, and that God hates evil and God opposes evil. Any photographer or artist will tell you that he or she is working with both light and shadow. And if there were no shadow, what would you have? You know, just a Gans field of all white. Color, hue, depth, texture, shadow. We have, you know, Francis Bacon said diamonds are most beautiful against a black background. The stars, we would never see them if the sky didn't go dark at night. We need the absence of good to contrast with goodness, and then to walk that middle way. It's a big philosophy in Buddhism, the middle way, is that balanced path. The Greek version of that, of course, is moderation in all things. And to find the balance, because it's not always on the 50, right, Robert? It might be on the it might be a 70-30 blend. It might be on the 20-yard line, you know. And in life, things are dynamic. So maybe it's a 60-40 one day and a 70-35 in the other direction on the next day. So balance is a beautiful word for comprehending this center that makes opposites into one whole thing. How do you think about it? What comes to mind when you bring up balance?
Wow. Well, well, from my uh, science background, and just of course I'm a ham radio operator as well, and just understanding of even electronics, that you have to have this. It's kind of, I'm almost thinking it's this sort of as above as below idea of, you know, we can physically even see in our own world the necessity of having balance, because when you don't, then things get out of order. Things could even become chaotic, and so it's almost as though the creator is even showing us in a physical way that you have to be able to seek the balance between what, like I said, appear to be opposites, but they're not. They're complementary.
Yeah. Opposites, pairs of opposites. I was tripping one day on a pair of glasses. It was one thing. A pair of pants is one thing. Why do we call it a pair? Because it has two legs, I guess. A pair of glasses. There's in philosophy, there's a conundrum in philosophy about the uphill road is also a downhill road. Can you imagine two people standing beside a road arguing about whether it goes uphill or downhill? This is just an aspect of a paradox that has to be wrestled with. And it even goes to the idea that God needs man as much as man needs a God, or that evil has its place, wickedness has its place. Uh, are you guys feeling, I'm wondering, the level of disgust about war in the last couple of weeks that I'm not sure I've ever felt? And if I did, it was, in the 60s and early 70s around Vietnam. But they're interviewing the victims of war. That's something that didn't happen in Iraq or Kuwait or Afghanistan. They didn't go in and interview the mothers or show my God, I saw a picture of a child all alone wandering around yesterday, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Nobody, a victim of war. It's just heartbreaking. It turned my stomach. I had a really tough time
It's
with that.
tough. And I agree. And it's tough. And it's been, for me personally, a very difficult 2 weeks dealing with seeing how things are. But what the beauty is coming out of this is we're actually unifying.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So we need, this is alchemical.
Including
The idea,
our friends, the Russian people themselves. We all need to unify together
yeah.
to get through this.
Well, these are the guys that were putting us on the space station for a decade. We had no way to get up there for 10 years, except with Soyuz rockets, so we could get along. Russian people are not our enemy. It's just this. If only Putin was 6 feet tall, I'm not sure. I think a lot of it is just his Napoleonic insecurity. He's a little guy.
Yes.
But yeah, this is alchemical. The idea that the fires of adversity, the pain and suffering of life, redeems us and makes us better. And it's just such a long, difficult, torturous process. So thank you for that, Robert. I should ask you for a parting shot. I miss doing that on the radio.
Well, today's my birthday, and I honestly, the best present of all would have been world peace. I was like, please. Yeah.
Well, may there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. So the least you can do is meditate, create some peace, give that to the world, and happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Robert.
Thank you.
29 again. Who else has a comment or question before we wrap it up here today? Oh, we have 15 minutes. We have lots of time.
I have a comment, if I could.
Sounds like Larry.
Yes, that's me. I just wanted to comment that my computer seems to be a little bit different than the one that you're describing. On my computer, the raise hands is under the participants button at the bottom of the screen. There is no reaction button at the bottom of the screen.
Oh,
so I just wanted, if somebody else has my situation, I just wanted them to say that raise hand is under the participants button.
Hannah, can you fill us in on what that's about?
I think you could possibly need to update your Zoom app, because for a long time it was under participants, or also in that 3 dots in the upper right corner of your picture, and then they did create this little reaction thing as the way to find raise hand. So you might just need to update your Zoom.
Do you know how to go about doing that, Hannah? Log into zoom.us?
If you go to zoom.us, and I don't even know if you need to log in, I think you can just I would just do a Google search for update Zoom or latest version of Zoom. And another way you can do it is, I think within the meeting itself, you might be able to, or within your, I think you might be able to check for updates from inside the meeting as well. Yeah, like if I go up to the upper left corner of the meeting and I click on zoom.us, there's an option to check for updates.
Okay,
So, and
Larry?
actually it's telling me that there's an update even for me today. So, and I thought I had the latest version. So they do that every once in a while.
Good to know. Good to know. Same thing with our browsers. We got to keep those updated too, and they make it so arcane. I don't know why. Thank you for that, Larry. Anybody else? Comments or questions? How about a question about? I'm sorry.
Somebody has their hand raised. Somebody has their hand raised, Michael. HH.
Hannah, my name is Hanif, and Michael, Hannah, thank you very much for putting this together every Sunday. It's very informative. First, Michael, I did not receive the email that you sent out on Friday or Saturday. So if you're kind enough to resend it, I would really appreciate it.
I wonder why not. Have you received emails about this class before?
Yes, I have. I receive your newsletter every week, but for some reason, while we were here, I checked spam and everything just hasn't shown up this week.
What I would ask you to do, I'll be happy to do that for you, but I want to double check your email. So would you email me simply, reference to this conversation at awmysteryschool@gmail.com.
Sir.
Then I'll double check the email, make sure you're connected, so to speak, and in any event, resend the email from Friday night so you'll have the handout.
Thank you. My wife has a question, and I'm going to go ahead, sir.
Thank you for such a wonderful class. My question is, where in this conversation and study does the concept of belief work with?
The concept of what?
Belief.
Belief as in faith?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a great question. That speaks, what that brings up for me anyway, and I get to change my mind. About this as I think of it. When we next week go into what I'm calling the lower correspondence of the divine trinity, which is the mental, emotional, and physical nature of human beings. Robert just said, as above, so below. It's the second rubric of the Emerald Tablet in ancient Hermetic philosophy, the idea that the third element of this trinity, the physical earth and the life forms that dwell upon it, are reflections of above in the image of the Creator, that kind of thing. So the mental and emotional and the physical corresponds, but it's a lower correspondence, obviously. We are of that which is divine. Arguably, each and everything in the world is sacred, but any given individual is not the totality of God. None of us is Christ or Buddha, or if so, I haven't met you yet. So faith or belief, I will address as an aspect of the emotional nature. And it's very important. It is of the heart. It is a matter of love. And trust and respect are primary components of love. When I, years ago, had a private practice with an office, and clients would actually come to my office, I was often asked to officiate at weddings and do premarital counseling with individuals, often very young people who'd never been married before. And I always asked, I made it a point to ask, why are you getting married? And people were always puzzled by that. And they would say, well, because we love each other, you know. And in one form or another, I would get around to saying, I really don't think that's enough. Like, I have lots of people that I love dearly, but I wouldn't even want to rent an apartment with them, you know, much less bond to them in holy matrimony. I'm not sure love is enough. And they would say, well, what else is there? And I would say, well, at the very least, there's trust and respect. Do you love each other? Do you trust each other? Do you respect each other? Anybody who's looking at a troubled marriage and what to do about the marriage has to ask those same questions. Is there not only love, whatever that is, as a lower correspondent, emotional love, as a lower correspondence of divine love, but is there also trust and respect? And I think faith and belief are part of trust and love, and for that matter, to some extent, respect. But it's a tricky word, this word faith, because sometimes it is offered to us as an alternative for reason or true understanding, as if we should dismiss our attempts to understand things further and just have faith, just believe. When we talk next week about the relationship of love, of all of our emotions, love is really not an emotion. There are four basic emotions. Happiness is an emotion. Sadness, anger, and fear are the four basic emotions. And some people say, no, there's six. They add surprise and disgust to those four. Love is a drive that brings up many, many emotions. But we have to consider that our mental nature, our thoughts are an energy, just as we defined it in the divine trinity. And the emotional nature is the force behind that energy. Robert mentioned that he's an amateur radio operator. He knows Ohm's law. Maybe you guys know Ohm's law also, where amperage is the volume or the amount of the energy, and voltage is the force or the push. You could think of it as a pull, but it's the force that drives it. Now, let me put it to you this way. If you have a thought that you don't care about, it just sits there, right? Could be a great idea, but it's not coming into manifestation without faith, without belief, without enthusiasm, without passion. On the other hand, if we have only passion and faith and enthusiasm, but our ideas are muddled, we'll create stuff, but it'll reflect the vague, hazy, muddled nature of our thinking. And then we wonder, well, why don't I have what I want? Well, because you don't know what you want. So our mental nature, our thoughts, our cognition, is the energy. The emotional nature is the force. Faith is the force. Love is the force, Luke. The force. Everywhere equally present. That's what drives. Faith is very important, but it should not be understood as now there is no need to understand or to ask difficult questions or to challenge authorities. But what a wonderful question. Thank you for that. Do you have a follow-up on that?
I do. It almost sounds like when you think of faith, you need to be mindful as to not accept faith as just a blind understanding. You have to, like you said, question it. Why do I believe, or why do I not believe, whatever may be the question or the thought process in that moment.
Exactly. Exactly. And you can see how this bears on trust. I mean, I have faith in gravity, in electromagnetism, in laws of thermodynamics, Newton's laws of motion. These are principles of the universe that I believe in, and there's integrity there. They don't let me down. I didn't just suddenly float off into space. I understand gravity well enough to use it, to balance myself when I get up out of a chair. Something I have to do consciously in these at this point in my life. I have to be aware of getting up out of a chair. So faith, trust, love, it's the center, it's the heart aspect. It's the Christos, this is, Christ said, I am the way, believe, in the way. It's Vishnu, it's the love aspect, it's the center, it's the emotion at the interface of thought and action. A little of both. Thoughts generate emotions, emotions generate thoughts. Think, feel, feel. Think, feel, feeling. There's this back and forth. And then action. That's the ideal. So faith is that drive, it's that love aspect, it's the emotional nature, the so-called positive emotions of happiness and joy and contentment and fulfillment and patience and tolerance and aesthetics and humor and all those wonderful, warm, fuzzy, lovable, positive emotions. And then the negative emotions, so-called, are everything that hurts, everything that irritates and frustrates. Positive, mostly love-based. Negative, mostly fear-based. But we should not avoid the negative. We'll talk about this next week. We call them negative because they hurt, but they're actually very, very valuable. Exceedingly valuable. If you could not feel physical pain, you could do great damage to yourself before you realize what you've done. Pain is our friend. And that sounds crazy to say, but without it, we'd be much worse off. The idea is not to, flagellate ourselves and deliberately suffer. It's just the light on the dashboard that says you're running out of gas. Your oil pressure is down. Your radiator's overheating. Pull over. The problem is not the light or the gauge. The problem's under the hood. The problem is not our anger, our fear, our hatred, or animosity. Those are symptoms or signals of an inner condition that needs to be addressed. That's where we're moving with all of this divine trinity of spirit, consciousness, matter has its lower correspondence in the mental, emotional, and physical. All right? I think that's pretty much going to do it for today. Anybody else have a quick comment or question? It's 12:30 here in California, so I'm going to wrap it up. Anything else before we go?
I just wanted to say thank you, Michael, so much. This is my first class that I'm attending, and I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you for including me.
Thank you. What's your first name?
Kathleen.
Oh, Kathleen, I didn't recognize your voice.
Oh, well, it's my radio voice. What can I tell you?
I do now. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate your
Okay, say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello.
Bye.
You all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you again.
Michael,
What, Hannah?
Melinda has her hand up.
Oh, Mindy, go.
Thank you. I don't want an answer to this because there's not time, but with the topic and with people's questions and comments, I would like you to address how to bring these abstract concepts into the frustrations of everyday life.
That's exactly why we're going to the lower correspondence, the mental, emotional, and physical.
You know what I'm really referring to right now is interfacing with people who just raise such strong emotions for good reason in us. We're talking about some of the world conflict and such, or just out in the world. I mean, I live in Phoenix, and you'll get to it, I'm sure, but that it just seems sometimes like this is a world unto its own, and then I open the door and boom. But I guess that's part of the point of this course, is so that we can integrate this.
Yeah, the secret to all of that, I think, in just a nutshell, because I want to respect the time, as you say, is non-attachment, to be in the world but not of it. We can't do anything for others we're unable to do for ourselves. So we'll talk a lot about emotional intelligence as practical, pragmatic, portable tools, techniques. Where does all of this touch the ground? And how can we apply what we're learning comprehensively in a very real world, daily life and affairs way? And if ever you feel that as we proceed I'm failing to do that, please bring it up again and say, I want practical tools. We got them. And it's not a whole lot of psychobabble or therapy or slicing and dicing your childhood. It starts with breathe and relax and step back and witness before, look before. It's taking the little 2-year-old to the curb and saying, stop, look, and listen. There's traffic. You don't just run into the street. How do we stop, look, and listen? How do we disengage? How do we let go, but still be mindful? Just not always engaged in reacting and responding. I promise you that that's my ultimate goal, is what good is airy-fairy philosophy if we can't use it in our lives in very real ways? So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Okay, people. Love you. Thank you. Peace and love.
Michael,
Namaste.
thank you.
Yep.
See you
Love
next
too,
week.
Michael.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Michael, I'll give you a call around 2:30.
Okay.
Around 1:30.
Sooner the better. I think I have a client coming up.
Okay. Well, I have another thing until 1:30, and then I'll call you right after that.
Text me before you call me.
Okay, I will.
Thanks, hon.
Okay, bye.